Hello, BookTube. I have reached 6,700 subscribers on this channel, and I thought since that was a round number, it would be a perfect excuse to have a Q&A. So I put out a call for questions, and once again I got swamped with questions, and once again they were great. So once again we are faced with the prospect of how long it's going to take to go through all of these. So I've got them on the Star Trek datapad. We'll just see. We'll see. I will keep an eye on the time, and we'll see how long this takes. So question number one is from Alan Braswell, and it is, you have been 28 for 3 years. How is that possible? Math is complicated. Then Jack Ivoniak asked, do you speak or read Russian? If so, how'd you learn? And if not, would you ever want to learn? And of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, whom do you prefer and why? I would say that I do not know Russian. But I can. I have been if I have a dictionary and a phrase book at my elbow, I am at a stage where I can at least do comparative readings. I can at least study a Russian text in front of me and make some sense out of it, and see some of the author's decision. But it's not at all the same as lots of other languages where I can simply read it. So I wouldn't say that I certainly don't speak it, and I wouldn't even say that I read it. I would say that I can sort of grope along. And as to how I learned, it was all self-taught. And for Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, of course I prefer Tolstoy. Of course I do. Tolstoy is as close as I think you get to Homer. Dostoevsky I think is brilliant, but Tolstoy wins it for me just because he's everything in the world. He's a whole universe instead of a style. Reflective Rambling asks several questions, so let's go through these. How, as someone of such a spry 28, have you been able to travel so broadly? Work, ambition, opportunity? It was opportunity. I wouldn't have missed it, and of course you shouldn't either. Even now, when travel is pestilential, you still shouldn't miss it, at least at some amount. Then I believe you've stated you're vegan. Does Frida adhere to this style as well, or are you okay with animals indulging in meat when they're domesticated? I feed Frida dog food. If it has meat product in it, so be it. Being a former frequent theater goer, what are some forgotten gems or underappreciated plays or musicals? Would you like to see any revivals or film adaptations? Do you have a dream cast, or is there a book or epic you'd like to see adapted for the stage? No dream cast, no forgotten epics. I used to see, when I lived in New York, I saw everything, and even for years after that when I lived in Boston. But all things were still reasonably priced. Someone just didn't bold-facedly say, okay, yeah, the ticket for this Broadway show is $900. Just blandly say that. Yeah, here's the show. Here's opening night. I can let you have this ticket for $500. I went, even when I lived in Boston, I went to Broadway shows on weekends all the time. When, if somebody had said that, either I or the next nearest person that heard them say that would simply beat them. Simply punch them to the ground and kick them around a little. It wouldn't even be a question of, no, I'm not going to pay that. It would be, you're a being from another world. You're obviously satanic. And now that's totally par for the course. Totally 100% par for the course. It's the stories I heard about some of the tickets for Hamilton. So the world prices now are just. Those were the days when you could have a third-story, 3-room apartment, Manhattan walk-up for $350 a month. Now a broom closet in Manhattan is $3,500 a month, with no amenities and no bathroom. So I don't have any connection to that world now anymore. I couldn't anyway. Don't you have other questions? You do. You've told us your secret to reading. How do you manage to respond so promptly and meaningfully to messages of the hundreds you receive from us pesky followers? I've never understood this aspect of YouTube, of YouTubers saying, well, I understand YouTubers who say, oh, I never look at my comments, or don't feed the trolls. There's some YouTubers, including some booktubers, who will say, don't feed the trolls when their comment section comes up. The implication being anyone who leaves a comment is a troll. Oh no, I never look at my comments feed. Oh no, don't feed the trolls. Don't feed the trolls. Them I understand, they're just jerks. But I don't understand the rest of it. I don't understand the rest of YouTube where people say, well, no, I can't answer all my comments. Don't be ridiculous. I might answer a couple or note a few. No, no. I've never understood that. It doesn't take any time at all, and I like you all. So if somebody leaves a comment for me that has meat to it, that isn't just oh do this or oh do that, I try to note every comment with the little like love feature to let somebody know that I've seen it and read it. But I try to answer as many comments as warrant an answer, and that's not even including email. I give my email in every video so that you can email me about anything you want. I'm perfectly happy to respond. I've never understood. I don't see. Maybe it's a function of huge channels, but I don't see any meaningful difference between you and me. We're just friends. So if you have a question for me that I don't hit in a video, feel free to email me. That's not. I don't. I'm not all that, as the kids say. So I don't understand how it would even be the problem of answering meaningful questions. Then like to see here, Mike Hogervorst asks, "Are you resuming read-alongs, Trollop read-alongs?" Yes, and others too. I have in mind for 2020. Jen Uncensored said, "Did you like the book The One by John Mars?" Not particularly, no. Which books are best when reading works from Dante Alighieri? Well, that would be the Divine Comedy. Do you have a certain publication you can recommend? Well, I would recommend the Commedia. Find an English language or your own native language translation that you like, and give it a try. I don't think you'll have a problem with the Inferno. Problems with first-time readers of Dante tend to happen with the second half of the Purgatorio, and then first-time readers of Dante tend to find Paradiso incomprehensible. I don't agree with that, and I'd be happy to help, but start with the Inferno. Absolutely. I don't think La Vita Nuova is also a masterpiece, but it's, I believe, more impenetrable. The Commedia tells a story. It might be a weird, out there story, but it's a story that's immediately understandable to the reader. La Vita Nuova is based, it's buried, it's deep rooted in a whole bunch of things that you would have to know, or it's going to seem strange to you, or you'll miss a lot. So I'd start with the Divine Comedy. Will you do another read-along with regards to Anthony Trollope? Absolutely. Yep. We are spending all of 2020 consorting with Lonely Trollops. And let's see here. Paper Mache asks, were you raised bilingual or multilingual? If not, at what point did you first tuck into your next language? I was not raised multilingual, unless you count. I will use the term language, that the ways that dogs communicate, which dog whisperers and dog experts will always tell you they have no idea what they're talking about. They were not raised with the species, and I was. And I know that was my first language. And I know that to a T. And I know how to shift into it, so that I've lost count of how many times dogs on leashes or on suburban sidewalks or whatever literally do a doggy double take because suddenly someone's talking to them in their own language. It involves a lot, not just language. But after that, I just did them as need be. Tomorrow's Classics asks, what are your thoughts on L. Frank Baum's original Oz books? I think they're garbage. If Hollywood continues to revive dead actors with CGI, what would be your ideal film cast pairing? Would you watch a new George Reeves Superman movie, or would moral questions muddy the waters? I read this and didn't know what it means. What moral questions would attend to a George Reeves? George Reeves, for those of you who don't know, was the actor who played Superman in the TV series The Adventures of Superman half a century ago, and I love him. I think he does a fantastic job as Superman. He is both immediately believable as a hero and also immediately believable as an alien. And I don't know what moral questions are muddying the waters here. Of course I would love a George Reeves Superman movie. I'd absolutely love that. I'd love another John Wayne Western movie. I wouldn't mind that in the slightest. Let's see here. Music Bookaholic says, what are your favorite documentaries? Well, I love Ken Burns' The Civil War. Everyone who hasn't seen that should see it. I love The Life of Birds by David Attenborough. It's probably my favorite, even though I recognize that Planet Earth is just an unbelievably epic thing. Unbelievably epic. Again, something you absolutely have to watch. I also love the original Connections by James Burke. I think it's fantastic. Same thing with The Body in Question by Jonathan Miller. And more recently, The Holocaust Inside the Nazi State, narrated by, what's her name? 4-foot-tall actress. I'm blanking on her name, but that is very good. It's got dramatizations in it, which I tend not to like in documentaries, but it's still really, really good. Let's see here. Eamon Duty says, when you are commissioned to write a review of one of your published outlets, do you retain the rights to the review for other uses? They revert to me after a month. Standard rule. So standard that most people don't even specify it. You can't do anything with it while it is still active copy for the publication. So usually after a month, all rights revert to you. Is your work on Open Letters Review versions of those you send to other outlets? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, you do not multiple publish, you do not multiple pitch or submit, you do not do anything like that. Absolutely not. No. No, 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 no. What I review for Open Letters Review, I review a lot for Open Letters Review, and those are works that are for Open Letters Review. And every once in a great while, I will have a review that I'm working on, that I'm working up for Open Letters Review, when another venue will ask for it. And, of course, being a pragmatist, the answer to that is always yes. So, because they're paying an Open Letters Review, I'm not paid for Open Letters Review. So, in a case like that, I might take some of the preliminary work that I've done on that piece and rework it and base a new review on it. But the nightmare scenario here would be if a place offering me a lot of money to review a book asked me to review a book that had already run at Open Letters Review or Open Letters Monthly before that. That would be the nightmare scenario because I'd have to say no. But no double dipping. No. I know that it seems to be anathema to young people in the 21st century because they think, well, I wrote this on Goodreads, here it is. No. No. You're not a limited store of words. Write it over. Write it new. Write something else. But don't double dip. Let's see. Oh, Eamon continues. You often and with obvious affection, Steve squeals galore, bring to our attention book review collections by other proponents of your art. Have you ever generated any publishing interest for yourself in that vein? I know that you get sent books by the promotions end of the publishing industry, but surely one of them would pass on a book proposal to their commissioning editors. It's not exactly how it works, and there'd be no interest. There'd be no interest at all. Collected reviews, you really have to hit the lottery for there to be any kind of general interest in such a thing. In mainstream publishing, I am not a high-profile reviewer. I review everything in the world. I am the Virginia Creeper of the reviewing world, but I'm not. I know high-profile reviewers, but I'm not one of them. And even the high-profile reviewers that I know, usually a collection of their reviews only becomes commercially viable if they win a Pulitzer or something like that. If suddenly they have hardware next to their name, maybe. But I don't think a publisher would be at all interested in collected book reviews. But fortunately, as I think you go on, fortunately, I don't have to worry about that. I can self-publish such things. You've spoken in the past about consolidating all your reviews, real world and online. They're both the same. They're both real world. On your website, and that is true, st.donoghue.com. I will eventually amass everything that I've ever written that I can reclaim. Any progress? There is slow, steady progress on st.donoghue.com. Slow and steady. It's fun. Most of the material was bulk ported over from Open Letters Monthly, and then there's a huge amount of stuff that comes from the archives of old publications elsewhere, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, the National, whatever. I need to go and find those, pull them, clean them up, reformat them, add in images and whatnot, and that takes time. It's fun to do, but it's time consuming. Would you consider doing a formal self-published tome of your best reviews for purchase by your ardent fans? Well, yes, I want to do many. I want to do a book a year on the reviews that I've written that year with commentary and expanded copy and whatnot. I just haven't done it yet. I haven't explored what it's like to actually self-publish a volume. I really mean to do that, but I haven't done it yet. How are we doing for time? 15 minutes, not bad. Several Gecko says, we've all heard about the controversy surrounding American Dirt, but is it actually good? No, it's not. It's a debut novel. It has a couple of good scenes, a couple of good threads running through it, and an all host of debut novel problems. It's just, there was a controversy around this because of something called cultural appropriation, and people who spend way too much time on Twitter decided that the author should not only lose her contract and her livelihood, but also her life. The controversy made a whole bunch of virtue signalers look terrible, but the book is unremarkable. It's totally unfair to the author to put her through this, the first book of her career, but For a debut novel, you all know I'm a big fan of debut novels. This had about the usual mix of promise and uh, workshopped hothouse flower preciousness that doesn't belong there. Uh, no, I wouldn't. The book is not actually all that good. It's not egregiously bad, apart from the controversy. Um, Mike Hogeverse asks, "How did you come to know Erasmus, and why do you like him so much?" And he notes, greetings from the Netherlands. The person involved here is the Dutch humanist Erasmus, and I am his biggest fan. And you won't often hear me talk about him on this channel, uh, but I do ardently love the spirit that comes through in his writing. That is the main draw for me, is that he seems intensely, he is the greatest humanist. He seems intensely compassionate, intensely omnivorously curious, intensely human to me. I know that's a lame answer, but I could go on for 2 hours on Erasmus easily. Uh, Edwin Parry asks, after reading for 10 hours, does it affect your eyesight? No. Luckily, knock on wood, it doesn't for me. Laura Wincello asks, the best friend you've ever known, if I'm remembering correctly, was Canine. Can you tell us what he was like and what made you such close friends? That is true. The best friend that I've ever had was a dog. I'm going to abstain from elaborating. Sean Stanfast says, do you have any recommendations for good biographies of Algernon Charles Swinburne or Alexander Dumas in English? I've never read a good biography of either one of them in any language. Carlos asks, I think you're the only one that can help me to solve this dilemma I am at the moment in. Let me start by saying that since the UK has left the European Union, I find myself thinking about embracing the European authors more often, and I think that would be great to buy more European authors in 2020. The problem is that I've read and adored Anna Karenina and War and Peace, and I want to know what you think I should read next. Give you two options that I have in mind, but feel free to suggest another. Resurrection by Leo Tolstoy or Crime and Punishment. Well, Crime and Punishment should be next. Do Crime and Punishment next. And then all of Dostoevsky's great stuff. So Crime and Punishment and The Idiot and The Brothers Karamazov. Don't bother with with Resurrection right at the moment. You can get back to that. Dan W. says, are there any books that you would recommend regarding the history of Scottish clans? Woefully underread on the subject. Jane Porter's book, or children's book, The Scottish Chiefs, is the first thing that came to mind, which is going to have Scottish history fans just shaking their head. Nevertheless, now I'm woefully underread on the subject, so I can't recommend Jane Porter's book. It's as terrific as the day it was written, but I don't know how historically accurate it is. Charlie Wrights says, how are you able to memorize the books you read, often in great detail and from many moons ago? Is it a strategy, for example, Memory Palace, or something that comes naturally? I don't memorize books, obviously, as you can tell from this channel. How often am I racking my brains trying to remember a detail? I retain a lot of what I read, but it's not something that comes naturally, and it's also not a strategy. It's just practice. That's all. It's just practice. It's a huge chunk of what I do and what I've done for a very long time. So it's a large part of my life. You know, you could see where I come from on the question if you, for instance, asked an ardent chef, how have you memorized all of these different things to do in the kitchen, the temperatures and the behavior of water and oils and sauces and whatnot? And they would say, no, I didn't memorize any of it. It's just part of my world. It is my world. Let's see here. Alexander Olivares Sanchez says, are we going to make Riches and Reed's sci-fi reprint series happen? I would love to. I would absolutely love to. It's a logistical and legal nightmare, but I would love to start it. Next time I'm up at the old farmhouse in Vermont, I will chat with Mark about whether or not we can make at least one book happen. That would be so much fun. The Elizabeth says, we know how you feel about Aristotle. Do your thoughts include the Poetics? Yes, they include all of Aristotle. It's all deadly, dusty, dull. It's all just awful. Anyway, Rasmus Tillander says, number one, should people still read Steinbeck in 2020? Why wouldn't they read Steinbeck in 2020? Sure. Yeah, they should. When he's good, he's really good. Certainly a major author. Question number two, is Vonnegut at his core a science fiction writer? No, he is a science fiction carpetbagger. At his core, he's a crappy writer. Never wrote a good word of prose in his life, in any format. But he absolutely did not care about science fiction. It drives me nuts when he or Margaret Atwood are referred to as great science fiction authors. They were carpetbaggers. That's all. He didn't care about the genre at all. Didn't understand it. Didn't make it work. Didn't adhere to any of its. No. He's not a science fiction writer. And number three, why do young men like myself like Haruki Murakami? And he assures me, I have read Tanizaki and Mishima. Well, Murakami is like a video game. I did a video on the two different kinds of reading, the two different kinds of parts of your brain that are stimulated, and Murakami very much stimulates the part of your brain that likes bright lights and shiny objects. He almost never sits down and calmly writes. There's virtually no. I mean, they're from the same country. They partake of the same literary tradition, but there's virtually no axes of comparison between him and someone like Tanizaki at all. And I don't think that Murakami could write anything like Tanizaki does, or any of the great Japanese authors of the early 20th century. I don't think he could do it. So they're not. Young men tend to like Murakami because they don't like the work of reading. They don't like the long, subtle, nuanced kind of reading that a lot of the best reading is, and that Murakami doesn't do. That's why the same reason they like Cormac McCarthy. Let's see here. Minnie Gunnifer says, "What was your experience of Yugoslavia?" I loved it, mostly the people, but also the beauty of the place. And also, do you think it was easier to travel around the world then or now? It was much easier to travel a long time ago when I did my traveling. Much easier. Now, oh God, it's much harder now. Said Day, how are we doing for time? 20 minutes. Said Day says, do you reread your journals? Yes, I do. How often and how much and what about do you write in them? Oh, I throw everything in the kitchen sink into a journal entry for that day. I throw everything in. Snatches of dialogue, scene descriptions, books, titles, pragmatic stuff, prices of things, places that I went. I throw it all in. I love keeping a journal, and that works. I also sketch. I'll do a quick sketch in my journal, and that works wonders when you go back and reread a journal, because it really puts you back in the time. The one thing you shouldn't do when keeping a journal, I mean, it's up to you, but my advice: one thing you shouldn't do in a journal is sit down and try and be profound. You're not going to be interested in that, and your journal is the book you're writing for you. So you're not going to be interested in that in 10 years at all. But you're going to be dying of curiosity to know what you were reading, or what the name of that place was that you used to go to every day and that you haven't even thought of in 20 years. Include all of that for yourself. How are we doing? Well, let's do a couple more and then we'll stop for now. John M. says, I love Jack Finney's book Time and Again. It requires a fair amount of suspension of disbelief and an interest in New York City. Do you like the book? I do. Also, Sophie's Choice. For me, both the book and the movie packed an emotional wallop. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this terrifically sad book and movie. I agree completely. The book moved me, and so did the movie. Anthony Suppa has a number of questions. So how about we stop with him? We'll stop with Anthony Suppa. Number one, how are we doing? 23 minutes, okay. What are your thoughts on U.S. national parks? I love them. I've been to every one of them. Do you have any especially fond memories of your travels to national parks? Lots of them, yeah. I have lots of them. I've spent a lot of time in national parks, including time that I was not technically legally allowed to spend. I've spent a lot of time deep in the bowels of national parks, way away from the places where tourists go. Those are fond memories. Most of them, some horrible memories, some bear memories, quite a few scorpion memories, but mostly good ones. Question number 2, do you like to attend theater? Have you spent much time in or around Broadway? I once upon a time did love to attend theater. I don't do it anymore. But once upon a time, I loved it. I ate it up. Absolutely loved it. And I spent a great deal of time in and around Broadway. I knew a lot of people who were in shows. I watched everything. I saw everything. Those journal entries, those journal volumes are full of great details. I don't do it anymore, though. Question number 3, being that you are such a fast reader, does experiencing a chunker differ when reading it in one sitting as opposed to reading it over days or weeks? I get the impression that it very much does differ, although a big chunker will take me some time. And that's why I like them, because I can get lost in the book, and that means as much to me as it does to anybody else, as to a slower reader. So, yeah, but the experience that some people have reading chunkers, where I know a couple of people who are still working on the same 1,000-page book that they were reading in the spring of 2019, and that is incomprehensible to me. I don't know how you would read a book like that. I don't know how you would. I don't know how you get anything out of it. I don't know how you would do that. That's a reading experience that I can't even imagine. And yet it's fairly common, I think. His fourth question is, do you think the Bible should be taught in American public schools in English class as literature? Yes, I do. Selections from the Bible and from all other religious texts should be taught in English class as texts of literature. Good luck having that happen, though. Because, as Daniel Dennett and a number of other people have pointed out, if you started to do that, if you started to teach religion as a course in school, nobody would leave high school having any religious faith. They would be fascinated by religion, comparative religion. They'd be absolutely fascinated by it, and they'd be a lot more scripturally literate, not only in the Bible, but also in all other sacred texts than they are now. But they wouldn't believe any of it. They wouldn't actually believe any of it. That largely depends on getting people early and indoctrinating them into one faith system to the exclusion of all others and telling them that it's inspired and divine. But if you show an inquiring 15-year-old that all major religions claim that, and you take them bit by bit through the sacred texts, most of them, I think, will come to the natural conclusion that none of these things are divinely inspired. They're all just works of literature, and you'll get I think, better educated kids out of the end process. But that very thing is the reason why that approach will never be taken in America, the most religiously fundamental, insanely religious country anywhere in the world. So it'll never happen here, and certainly not in public schools. His fifth question is, you often state that many poetic qualities are lost when non-English texts are translated into English. Have you ever experienced a text that is improved after being translated? As was said of Vatek by Beckwith, that it's better in translation than it is in the original. But no, I don't think that I have. I don't think that quip about Beckford was meant intentionally anyway. I think it was meant just to hit him. And then his sixth question is, do you ever receive thick volumes of poetry in the mail? I do, occasionally. I've got a big volume of two volumes of the collected poetry of T.S. Eliot. I'd love to see things like that. What I wouldn't give for a new, carefully annotated, big, thick volume of the collected poetry of John Donne, for instance. Years and years ago, there was such a couple of volumes for James Merrill. Those were a joy to get, but usually not. All right, so that's going to do it. We'll stop there. I'm not going to do any more of these today, so we'll just do these Q&As this week until we get to the end of the list. So I'll stop at Anthony Suppa here, and I'll make a note, and then we'll go on with this with 30 minutes. We'll go on with this tomorrow. So I will see you then. Thank you, Book 2.